The 2016 Mr. Olympia was fairly historic for the Classic Physique division. Why? Well, it was the very first Mr. Olympia where the Classic Physique division was included. But since then, the Classic Physique division has evolved tremendously. So do I agree with the placings at the 2016 Mr. Olympia for the Classic Physique division? Well, stick around to find out. But first of all, what were the placings? Well, to the very left, we have Danny Hester, your very first Mr. Olympia for the Classic Physique division. Then to the right of him, we have Arash Bar, the runner-up at the 2016 Classic Physique Mr. Olympia. To the right of him, we have Sadiq Hazovich placing third. And then finally, we have Breon Ansley placing fourth. So first, I'll go through the mandatory shots for these four gentlemen, and I will see whether or not I agree with the placings. So without further ado, let's get straight to it, starting off with the frontal biceps. And when it comes to the frontal biceps, this shot is not that telling, but if I would have to pick a winner, I would say that it would be Breon Ansley. I would also say that this showcases that Breon Ansley had the best conditioning. When you look downstairs, he has the best muscle separation. Danny Hester, he also has that grainy look since he's an older gentleman. And older gentlemen tend to look more grainy because they have more muscle maturity and things like that. But then again, should that count for that much in the Classic Physique division? I do not think so, but let us move on. When it comes to the side chest shot, this shot is a lot more telling because I would say that Arash Bar and Breon Ansley are quite a distant first and second place. Because Danny Hester, although he does not have a bubble gut, so to say, he does not have the best midsection. I do agree that the angle here is sort of ripping him off a bit, but still, that midsection is not a Classic Physique Olympia worthy in my opinion. And then we have Sadiq Hazovich. He has no pec development to speak of. He is very thin from the side. And Arash Bar and Breon Ansley, they look really good from the side. Now, I'm not a big fan of the way that Breon Ansley is executing the side chest shot, and he stopped doing this execution after the 2016 Mr. Olympia. So he's executing it like Big Ramy, creating more detail downstairs. And it is quite impressive, the detail that he has in his quads and also the split he has between his quads and his hamstrings. But still, I would give this pose to Arash Bar. I would say that upstairs he has a slight edge, especially when it comes to the pecs. And again, I'm not a big fan of the way that Breon Ansley is executing this pose. But even so, Arash Bar, first place, Breon Ansley, second place, and then we have the distant third and fourth place finisher, Sadiq and Mr. Danny Hester. Now, from the back, things are a lot closer, or at least close between Arash Bar and Danny Hester, because in my opinion, Breon Ansley, he is running away with this pose. Now, even though you could make an argument for Arash Bar because he has a bigger back and he also, arguably, he has a better lower back, or at least it is quite close. I would say that Breon Ansley, he just has too much detail upstairs and downstairs for the rest of these dudes. But Arash Bar, I will give him the second place, but it's close between him and Danny Hester. They are both good from the back, or at least decent. But Sadiq Hazovich, he has no back to speak of. So I do not know what he is doing in this call-out. I'm sure that you could find some better competitors from this Mr. Olympia. But it is what it is. He took a third place, and I think that politics did indeed have something to do with that because he was a social media star. But it is what it is, guys. Let us move on to the ab and thigh. And here, I do not see any of them executing a great ab and thigh shot. First of all, we have Breon Ansley. He has fairly good quads, but then again, he does not have the best V-taper, and also his abs are a bit washed out. When it comes to Arash Bar, he does have fairly good abs, but I do not like the way that he's executing this pose. And also, he does not have the best V-taper out there because his midsection is fairly thick. When it comes to Sadiq Hazovich and Mr. Danny Hester, none of those two gentlemen impress me that much. Then again, they might be getting a bit ripped off because it does not look like they are fully flexing. But it is what it is, guys. Let us move to the classic pose, I guess. And again, none of these guys are hitting an amazing classic pose, in my opinion. I would say that Sadiq Hazovich, he's hitting a fairly decent Frank Zane-like shot. Breon Ansley, I do not like that pose at all. I don't know what it is called, but it does not look that classic to me. But we have two more classic poses. This one right here and this one right here. Surprisingly enough, Danny has the shot. It looks a bit, I guess, unique, strange, you could even say, but I actually do like that shot. Again, Arash Bar, he's hitting the same shot as he was hitting in the first classic pose, and it is quite decent, I must say, quite decent. But moving on, this man right here was your 2016 Classic Physique Mr. Olympia champion. And in my opinion, he should not have been so. Why? Well, if you look at his midsection in this pose, it was not the best, and he is also very short and stocky. He did indeed have that grainy look, but come on, guys, that should not count for that much in the Classic Physique division. And I will also say that Breon Ansley, he had much better muscle separation than him. So I would even say that Breon Ansley had better conditioning than him, so I do not get why he won the 2016 Classic Physique Mr. Olympia. In my opinion, he looks much more like a 212 bodybuilder. I guess the same argument could be said for Breon Ansley, but for 2016, Breon Ansley had a fairly classical physique. But moving on, we also have this man right here, Sadiq Hazovich, placing third. And in my opinion, he absolutely robbed Breon Ansley, placing fourth. I have no idea how this guy placed third and ahead of Breon Ansley. From the back, Breon Ansley would absolutely smoke this man. From the side, he would also absolutely smoke this man. Now, from the front, he does not have the worst of structure, so you can make an argument of him beating Breon from the front, but I think that he did not have as good as conditioning as Breon Ansley. And then again, he was also getting smoked by Breon Ansley when it comes to the arm departments and the quads as well, because he has fairly smooth and soft quads, at least looking at this shot. So he absolutely robbed Breon Ansley in my opinion, but then again, a lot of sketchy stuff happened at the 2016 Mr. Olympia for the Classic Physique division, like these two gentlemen right here. Now, I would say that 90% of you guys could look at these two gentlemen, and you would easily say that the guy on the right, Robert Timms, should place ahead of the guy on the left, Mr. Darren Charles. But that did not happen. Darren Charles on the left, he took 5th place, and Robert Timms placed behind him in 6th. And trust me, guys, it is not only the frontal biceps. Robert Timms was better than Darren Charles in pretty much all of the poses, so I have no idea how Darren Charles beat him, but it is what it is, guys. But let us move on to the guys that I believe were rightfully so the top two gentlemen, Arash Bar and Breon Ansley. Now, first of all, in the frontal biceps, you could definitely make an argument for both of these gentlemen. I would say that I am not a big fan of the way that Breon Ansley executes the shot at all. Sort of looks like his midsection is sticking out. Meanwhile, Arash Bar, he's hitting a semi-vacuum. But then again, you can make an argument for both of these guys. I would say that Breon Ansley, he showcases a bit more detail, especially downstairs. So I would say that he has better conditioning. But then again, I strongly prefer the way that Arash Bar executes this pose, and I would say that his lats, at least in the way that he is executing them, it looks like they are a bit thicker, they flare out a bit more, and they insert a bit lower. But let's move on to the side chest shot, and I already said what I had to say about the side chest shot between these two gentlemen. I believe that they are fairly close, and if Breon Ansley was executing this pose correctly when it comes to the Classic Physique division, he might have been edging out Mr. Arash Bar, but as it is right now, I prefer Arash Bar quite strongly. Now, from the back, again, I have already discussed this, but even with these more high-quality photos, I would say that Breon Ansley is handily taking this pose. Now you can also make an argument for Rush Bar because indeed I would say that he has a better lower back and he also has bigger and thicker traps. But then again, you also look downstairs because it is quite close upstairs, and you can see that Breon Ansley is pretty much taking this shot. Now the ab and thigh, even though Breon Ansley is executing this in a much better fashion in my opinion, I would say that Rush Bar is absolutely smoking him when it comes to the ab department. And also, when it comes to the structure, you can even make an argument for a Rush Bar. Even though he has a thicker midsection, he's also much wider. So there is that, but moving on, I would say that this, in my opinion, should have been the correct placements when it comes to the top 4 gentlemen. In my humble opinion, you can also make an argument for Breon Ansley, obviously, but I do think that Rush Bar at the 2016 slightly edged out Breon Ansley. And in my opinion, it had a lot to do with the posing. The way that Breon Ansley was hitting the shots, it was just not ideal. And if you also look at the classical shots, I would say that Rush Bar, even though he was not hitting the very best classical shot, he was hitting better classical shots than Breon Ansley. So in first place, I would have Breon Ansley. Or excuse me, I would have a Rush Bar. In second place, I would have Breon Ansley, but they are very close. And if you want to make an argument for Breon Ansley being the 2016 Mr. Olympia for the class physique division, I would have no issue with that. And in third place, I would have Danny Hester. And in a very distant fourth place, I would have Sadiq Hazovich, who absolutely robbed Breon Ansley and probably a few other guys. So there's that, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the video. I love you, ladies and gentlemen.